We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Andry, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. And we should get a little update from Tom. How are things going over at avgadgets.com? Your new career, we can say.
my new spot for me.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. It's going pretty well. I'm publishing at least a story a day.
Very good, very good.
During the weekdays, and I've started publishing a question of the day, which is a weird way to phrase it now that I think about it. Article on Saturday mornings too.
Okay.
Whenever I get around to it. So, just having fun with it so far. The site is live, but it's not fully optimized yet. So there's still right now it's just me putting up content and then, making sure it's all, written the way it's supposed to be written and everything else. But it's just if you guys wonder where I get the things I write about, it's mostly from this podcast. Whatever you guys ask about, I'm like, well, these are things people are wondering on the line, so I might as well answer them over here too. So that's what I'm doing. I'm doing a lot of how do I stop rattles in my home theater? What's the deal with ultra short throw projectors? Why would how do room acoustics work, and why are they important? Where do you put your subwoofers? Stuff like that. Stuff we get asked all the time here. I'm answering over there. So
there, there you go. People have asked for years at this point, sometimes for resources of like, hey, these are things that we notice get asked frequently on AVRant. Right. And do you just have a write up so that I can read it instead of trying to search through and find the audio or video answer?
Go to avgadgets.com and type in your question as you asked
right.
it. Because that's kind of how I'm titling them. Because I just figure, why try to be clever with the SEO and all that when I could just put, why does my theater rattle? Or how to stop rattles in my theater, and that's the SEO stuff. So that should help you get to those questions easy.
And obviously this moment in early December of 2020, not every question is there or anything, and it might never be, but it's going to be a resource and a place to check, and that's good. And I have to assume by some of the text messages I've received from Tom that some of my input is showing up on that website. It would seem odd if those questions had nothing to do with AV Gadgets.
Yeah, you went to write an article over there, Rob. You're more than welcome to put something down on paper. I'm happy to. I'm just confirming with you things that I remember talking about on the podcast. And a lot of times, the crazy part is, a lot of times we talk about stuff in this podcast, and I'm like, okay, yeah, we've said this 1,000 times, so let me just Google it. It's nowhere.
Yeah.
It's only in Rob's brain. That's where it is. It's all collected in Rob's brain. And you know how much good that does us? Well, it does it to the people who listen to this podcast, tons of good. But for everybody else in the world, not that much. So little things like viewing distances and field of view and stuff like that, they're all out there, but they're sort of weirdly hidden behind paywalls. Right. Like the SMPTE standards are behind a paywall. The THX standards, like I know they exist.
Oh yeah, but since the new ownership, and they've kind of they're not really focusing on that anymore.
They've killed all the web pages that have the actual references. So I'm having to grab from 17 different sources and pull these things in there. I'm like, Rob, you said this, and he's like, yeah, that's kind of in my brain. I'm like, well, all right, well, let's put it on paper someplace. So stuff like that, just little things. Today I was working on the article about risers, about how, why you might want to add a riser, and why all the advice out there to cut a bunch of holes in them and fill them up with insulation is a bad idea, So, if you want your thing to rattle like crazy, knock yourself out. But here's why you don't want it to rattle. So things like that we answer on this podcast all the time. I'm sort of translating over there. I'm doing news and stuff like that as well, and how-to articles and some reviews. I haven't done a ton of reviews yet, but we'll start getting more review units in for things as we go forward. But that's sort of the goal, is to do a mix of those two things. But putting this information that it really seems like there should be a central source for it. There's not. So we're gonna do that. We're gonna do that.
Very good.
It's really easy for websites to focus on reviews of very, very high end products. Sure. Everybody likes reading about them and stuff like that. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm not interested in doing it. I'm not interested in sitting there with a $10,000 amplifier and trying to tell you why it's better than a $9,000 amplifier. I don't believe it is. So it's hard for me to convince you that it is. So I will instead focus on things that I think to be true and not, or know to be true, and not things that make me money by getting advertisers because they sell $10,000 or $100,000 amps. All right, this is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. You go to avrant.com, leave us a comment there, facebook.com/avrantpodcast, youtube.com/avrant. You can contact Rob directly at rob@avrant.com. His Twitter is @firstreflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. My Twitter is @avrant_Tom. Now, I want to thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, just to support the podcast in some way. One of the ways you can do that is going to patreon.com/avrantpodcast, where you can become a subscribing member, continuing supporter, an ongoing AV enthusiast. I don't know what other names we could call you. Basically, it means that every month Patreon takes money from you and gives some of it to us. Hopefully most of it to us. So we have 126 patrons currently up on patreon.com, and we want to thank every single one of you.
Indeed. Patreon.com/AVRant podcast. It's an automatic donation. Think of it as a voluntary subscription if you want to. $1 is the minimum, and add as many zeros as you please, because we don't think there's any upper limit. But 126 patrons over there, thank you very much for the financial support.
Thank you. If you can't support us financially, we completely understand. Find some way to support us in any way you deem necessary or possible, and then we will mention you on this podcast if you let us know what you did. So James, our House of Cards guy, had a receiver die on him last week, so he bought a replacement Denon S650H from Accessories for Less and let them know we're the result. We're the reason he learned about them, and he has made many purchases with them as a result. James, different
last name.
Yeah, it turns out, wrote and directed the recent review of LG's 8K 88-inch $30,000 OLED TV for Linus Tech Tips. Okay. Yeah. And since we've been helping him out with this new apartment's acoustics, he asked us about how we tackle reviewing expensive gear like this. He gave us a shout out in the show notes for the video and included the banner for AVRant in the video itself. That is fairly awesome, even though I don't know what Linus Tech Tips are.
Oh, really?
I'm sure I've never heard of it. Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah, they got like 12.5 million subscribers on YouTube. So if they might have
12.50001 after this.
Right. If a teeny tiny portion find their way to AVRant, that might be a lot of questions, but very grateful for that. That
would be great.
We were not providing information to James as like a celebrity person or anything like that.
Right.
He's just found us organically and said, hey, they've got some useful information, and reciprocated with a very nice shout out in the show notes and banner in the video. That. So really appreciate that, James.
Yeah. So it's funny, reviewing TVs over the years has gotten so much easier.
Right.
used to be you had to have a light meter, and you had to all go through those calibration and stuff like that. And most of the TV reviewers I know these days are just like, yeah, so I checked it, but it's basically, you're 95% of the way there just by doing these 3 or 4 things. But with a TV like this, you really want to take it through and make sure that you're going through all the options and telling people exactly how to set this thing up.
Well, I mean, they actually even said, like, it is an LG OLED. It's bigger. It's higher resolution, but everything that they did in previous LG OLED reviews still applies. Right. Nothing different about that. And they're like, here, put it in filmmaker mode. You're done.
You're done.
Like, yep, absolutely.
Well, and when you're getting a $30,000 TV, let me tell you who's not hanging it on the wall. The guy who bought it. Or the gal who bought it. I'm not going to be sexist here. So, whoever bought it is not hanging it on the wall. They've got somebody else to do it. And God help you if it's the Best Buy guys.
Well, that's
okay?
a point with the 88-inch too. It comes with an attached stand. They're like, you can theoretically wall mount it, but you would have to like disassemble it and solder on your old power cord. So,
right. Well, that can do that. That's not that hard.
Throw in that part of the review. That was good.
That's cool. All right.
Still James.
All right. And this is still James. He says, okay, I remember this guy now. So he's already implemented our idea of putting hexagonal absorption panels within some hexagonal shelves. So basically on this back wall or side wall, I can't remember, he had these hexagonal shelves that were kind of put together. It had planters on them and stuff like that. And we were like, if you just shove some acoustic material in there and put some fabric over it, you wouldn't even know.
Right.
It would be an acoustic panel that you had no idea was back there. So he calls them stealth acoustic panels, and he has plans to add plenty more, some that will blend in by matching the wall color and some that will have a friend's artwork printed on them. And I do remember, this actually looks incredibly good. I don't know if it's just a picture, but it's very, you can tell there's something in there,
right.
but it's very hard to tell that there's something in there that's different than the wall behind it. It's the same color, it matches really well, and it looks like it's part of the design. It doesn't
Absolutely. Yeah, nobody is going to walk in there. An interior designer is not going to walk in, look at that, and go, oh, those are, studio wedges or egg crate
what did you do?
Acoustic panels or something. Like, I really don't think they're going to spot that as an acoustic treatment. So very nicely
right.
done.
They're gonna look back at that and just go, "Oh yeah, okay, well that's a thing. That's that's interesting. Where did you get those shelves? Those are very interesting. I like the plush background on them. Yeah, so do I. It looks super professional.
So just before we go to the notes of gratitude, I just want to make sure I thank James House of Cards C for mentioning us to Accessories for Less. Since both people were named James, I kind of neglected to thank James C. So James C. and James S. Thank you both very much for supporting the podcast.
So we have some notes of gratitude from people who have basically appreciated the fact that we have worn our masks and not gotten COVID, which is why this podcast is continuing to go on. I mean, honestly, and I make light of that, but the fact is there's a lot of mental health issues that are going around, and it would not be surprising to have one or both of us break down and say, I can't handle it anymore.
I'll share, since it came back perfectly fine news, a negative test result, but I took my aunt to get a COVID-19 test. We have a drive-through where you don't even get out of the car, just roll down the window and they put the swab up your nose and you're in and out in about 5 minutes. And her result came back negative, so things are okay there. She just has a runny nose. That's really all it was. But our guidelines here say whatever your symptoms, no matter how minor, just come get a test, because you want to make sure to inform everybody who's been around you to isolate if it were to come back positive. So a runny nose is a very uncommon symptom of COVID-19. Typically, it's a drier cough and things like that. She doesn't even have a cough, but regardless, better safe than sorry. So that's how we're handling things here.
Right. And here, like, there's people and I say all around us, but there are people I know that I have not interacted with socially in any way, shape, or form, but that are in my circle of friends that are, the whole families are going down based on COVID. I don't know anybody that's died, thankfully, but I do know a lot of people who have gotten it, and a lot more who have disappeared for 2 weeks, off of social media and stuff like that, and then suddenly come back for 2 weeks later and not said anything about it. I really feel like, and this is something that I will probably talk more about in the future as we go forward on this podcast. There's a lot of stigma right now that's going, that I'm hearing people experience because of getting COVID, as if it's their fault they got COVID. It's very easy for somebody, especially like me, who's been exceptionally, kept my kids home, been, neurotic about mask wearing and everything else. It's very easy to blame people who have gotten COVID for the fact that they've gotten COVID, and that's just not fair. And we have to, as a society, remember that even if somebody wasn't being as safe as you thought they should be, there is definitely somebody out there that's looking at you and saying, you're not being safe enough. And they could have that same feeling about you. So empathy, sympathy, respect, when you find somebody who's gotten COVID, regardless of their political leanings or how much they wore a mask or, how many social gatherings they went to, the fact is they, within what they thought was safe, they thought they were being safe. They thought they were being safe enough, and COVID got to them. And you could go to the grocery store with your mask on and still come home with COVID. So let's not judge other people. So let's remember that. I know somebody in particular that a friend of mine who got ostracized by family and friends and everybody else for getting COVID, really went through a really hard time because of it. So I don't want that to happen to anybody else. So if you know but somebody that's got COVID, reach out to them, or who has gotten it, especially if they have it now and they're suffering through it. Reach out to them, offer to drop off meals, offer to do shopping for them, offer to help them out, because this is not something that is it's not a virus that goes out there and only gets the people that you don't like or that you shouldn't like. It goes out there and it could be you. So at the very least, you should try to help those out that are having a harder time than you are. Now, some notes of gratitude for people who are thankful that this podcast is still going. We have Kris, we have Andy, who really enjoyed the Thankful and Infinite podcast and wants us all to get together twice a year. What's the other time?
He suggested July 4th. That was his suggestion.
Yeah, but we couldn't invite you. What would you have to do that day?
I could call it a late Canada Day. That'd be all right.
I wouldn't call it Boxing Day because I feel bad that we don't get a Boxing Day. I'm also very confused about why there's so much fighting during Boxing Day, because why would they have a day just to celebrate that sport? But whatever. James Brett, who says pomegranate, when we're not exactly sure why,
wink,
but
wink.
Okay, wink, wink. James, if you don't know what he's talking about, then you know who you are. Martin, he's in Denmark, and he's a member of the 2 Hour Plus Club. Nathan, who remembers when Rob was just a listener and got the nickname Grammar Rob. Yeah, but he's still Grammar Rob. Believe me. Gurinder, who enjoyed the Thanksgiving episode and seeing all 6 of us. He loved Lee's story about a film actually melting. He didn't know that could happen. I've actually seen that happen as well, so it's not that unusual. And is Rob's theater room really that small? He asks,
sure
how
is.
do you get in without bumping into something? Plus a pat on the head to Rob for being the MC, because good job, little Canadian. And my understanding, and I have not been in Rob's room, and I'm unlikely to do so for the next couple of months at the very least, is where Rob sits. If he leans to one side, he can touch
reach out
PC13 Ultra, and he could reach to the other side, and he could touch a PC16 Ultra or whatever they're called.
PC13 Ultra in my case.
13
Not quite
Ultra.
that large.
13 Ultra. Yeah. So yes, it's very small.
Yeah.
So how do you get in, Rob? Is it like the seat like mechanical and it just drops you in like the cockpit of an X-wing fighter?
I mean, I suppose I could leap over the back side, over the backrest there. That would be a way. But no, if I have surround back speakers, because I typically don't, but sometimes I do for testing purposes. If I have surround back speakers, they have to go on stands, one of which has to be physically moved out of the way of the door. So when the door closes, I have to physically move it back into position. So there is no way to have permanent surround back speakers. And then, yes, I do, in fact, physically brush against one of my PC13 Ultra cylinder subs as I go past the side of my 3-seater couch to get into the seat. Anybody else would too, and that's why cylinders are handy, because I'd rather brush against that than the pointy edges of like an Axiom EP500 or something. I'd be scraping up my knee every time. So the soft cylinder is much nicer to brush against every time.
That EP500 is never going to live down those sharp corners.
That's right.
I'm sorry. That is just such a bad design
Well,
choice.
Kris, Andy, James, Brett, Martin, Nathan, and Gurinder, we really do appreciate the notes of gratitude and encouragement, and we're very happy that lots of people enjoyed the Thankful and Infinite Podcasts episode. So that's lovely to see, and thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
All right, in the news, Warner Brother, and this is a big one, announced that all of their 2021 theatrical releases will get day-and-date releases on HBO Max in the United States. They're like, please buy our streaming service.
They definitely are.
Please buy
They're
our
giving
streaming
up
service, please.
like almost all of the U.S. domestic box office to try to get you to subscribe to HBO Max instead. That is a big gamble. Wowzers. But I guess they're assuming most theaters in the United States are probably not going to be opening back up for at least half the year. Very thankful that we do have...
Yeah, they can go back on that the minute that the theaters open back up. Oh, we changed our mind.
Yeah.
Change our mind.
Yeah. Vaccine starting to roll out in the UK. Might be coming, by the time you hear this podcast, might be starting in the United States. And
Was that?
Canada should be starting next week, so... with the Pfizer vaccine.
What should be starting? Sorry, I missed that. Although the vaccine, that's
yeah.
right. What we're like 6 to 8 months from being able to, like us, you and I.
Right.
Maybe you, because you're a little bit more forward facing than I am.
I don't know when I'm
home.
getting it, but yeah.
but I've got friends that are like first line. I've got
Right.
a friend who's a pediatric nurse, and he's like, yeah, man, the minute that thing comes out, you can stick it in me right away. I was like, yeah, okay. I mean, there's lots of people out there talking about, things that they're concerned about with, not anti-vaxxers, those people are crazy, but actual people who are rational and thinking about, how fast this thing came to market. So there are always going to be concerns about that, but he's obviously paying very close attention to it because he has to, and he's definitely excited about it. Now I've talked about this before. I've got 2 cousins. They're married. They're both PhDs, microbiology, and they're cancer researchers. And whenever my wife and I have a question about anything that's sort of that on that level, we just call them up and say, hey, what are you doing about whatever this is? So we're going to basically call them and say, are you getting the vaccine? If they say you already got it, then that's my research. That's what I'm doing. I think my cousin actually works for the same company that makes that Regeneron drug.
Oh, okay.
So I don't say she'll have insider information, but she'll definitely be well versed on what's going on. So that's what I'm doing. So when you hear that I'm going to get it, then you know that I've done that amount of research. That's the research I'm doing. Anyways, okay, back to Warner Brothers. There will be no additional charge for HBO Max subscribers. Each movie will be available for 1 month, starting on its theatrical release day in the United States, and they will be available in 4K HDR and some with Atmos audio. This decision was apparently made without informing many of their best-known producers and directors. Christopher Nolan expressed disbelief and condemned the move, saying Warner Brothers' biggest filmmakers are now working for the worst streaming service. Christopher Nolan, dude, seriously? Dude, stop yelling, get off my lawn about this whole thing. Just cut it out. Tenet wasn't that good. That's what everybody's saying, and I haven't seen it yet. Tenet's not that good. You're not the auteur you think you are. Everybody likes the Batman movies, but everyone admits that the last one kind of sucked. Come on, we all know it.
I do think
the
he
first
has
one
a
was slow
point
too.
that this was a rather large decision to make without, at least mentioning it before the press release went out to like all of your contracted producers and directors.
Right. Well, I understand that too. You don't want to be
yeah.
blindsided by something like this, but okay.
That was not handled in the best way possible. Yeah.
Oh, are you kidding me? A movie studio did something in not the best way possible. Have you seen some of the marketing things where everybody thought it was bombs and stuff like that?
Well, I guess we didn't even mention last week because the news came out like right as we were recording it. But yes, HBO Max is getting 4K HDR, including Dolby Vision support and Dolby Atmos support. That'll be out in time for Wonder Woman 84 on Christmas Day, and then all of these 2021 theatrical release movies. They're not all going to have Atmos audio from what was mentioned, but they'll all have at least 4K HDR, not necessarily Dolby Vision, but at least 4K HDR.
So I mentioned this to my wife, and I had to preface the whole thing with like, listen, we're not subscribing to another service. It's not happening. But I am highly considering on Christmas Day to subscribe to the trial version of HBO Max so I can watch Wonder Woman. I'm not going to the theaters. So there's no chance I'm doing that. But I would consider doing this. My problem is once I sign up for it, am I going to be able to not sign up for it? Right now we use a good mix of all of the services, and the one service that we use the least of is Amazon Prime.
Okay. But you have that for the shipping.
Well, that's the problem. Is that one is my wife enjoys the shipping, so that doesn't really
Prime Video is a byproduct of the paying for Amazon Prime shipping.
Which is why everybody's like, "Oh, your interface sucks," and they're like, "Yeah, but free shipping." Oh, right, free shipping. Yeah. Oh, you don't have Dolby Atmos or anything. Yeah, but free shipping. Oh, right.
I mean, technically they do. They're capable of it, but very few things support it on Amazon Prime Video, the content itself. Should be mentioned, this whole HBO Max thing, it basically is United States only, though. There are plans to bring HBO Max, the streaming service, to some countries in Europe. But like no plans to bring it to Canada, no plans to bring it to most of Asia as of yet. I'm sure at some point they want to, but this whole announcement, I guess the expectation is that theaters will be open in other countries. Things are still and where theaters are allowed to be open in the United States, they will be, and they'll still be putting the movies in there. But this is pretty much a U.S. centric announcement. This HBO Max movies coming out day and date, and they will only be on HBO Max for 1 month. Then they'll go back to the traditional windows after that first month. But obviously, that's when most people are going to watch a new movie.
I would be honest with you. I don't think I think a month is super generous. I think if they did it for the first week or
2 weeks,
even 2 weeks, that would be enough. And then if you want to see it again, you go to the theaters, that sort of thing. Of course, the question that I know the HD guys are going to have about this is, how is this going to persist past COVID and everything else? You know, I don't know. Because the problem that you have is that once you give somebody this sort of option, it's very hard to take it away again. Now, I just made the joke that yes, they're as soon as COVID's over, they're going to change their minds, but you're going to lose a massive amount of subscribers. And if your point is to get subscribers, this is it feels desperate. It does. To me. It feels like a desperate grab for subscribers.
Take that I can't see how this really does replace all the revenue. Like when The Matrix 4 comes out, do you really think you're going to make as much revenue from monthly HBO Max subscribers as you would from box office sales? So I don't see it coming out as a wash. However, if theaters are still closed, then you're looking at, way less box office take versus at least something's coming in. So yeah.
Right. So, I mean, you look at it this way. Okay, so however much money you made across the year from HBO Max subscribers, and then subtract that number from what you expected to take in from box office numbers, and there's a difference right there. And I agree with Rob. It's going to be a insubstantial. That's a double negative. It's going to be a substantial amount of money that they're going to be losing by doing this. It's so weird that, and we're all, you in particular, I know we should be getting onto the podcast here, but you in particular, you're dropping Netflix because they've increased the price by a couple of bucks. The amount, and you're still paying less than you would have paid to go to a movie theater to see one movie a month.
And yet it's a little bit more than that, but yeah.
Yeah, popcorn, and you buy anything else to go along with it. You're definitely over that. I'm at $17.99 is what they're going to increase mine to. They keep announcing it every time I open the stupid app. But $17.99 is not me and my wife sitting next to each other watching one movie a month. Yeah. So it's really hard to look at that and see that you're quote unquote losing money. But there are people out there who will go to 2, 3, 4 movies a month. And I am one of them. I was one of them. I would do that. I would go see a movie, sometimes if I really liked the movie and it wasn't, it'd been out for a little while, you can get in for a little bit cheaper. I'd see it 2 or 3 times in a week sometimes if I really liked it. So, I would spend more money than that easily on one single movie, and yet we will balk at paying $25 a month, $30 a month, $50 a month, which is probably what Warner Brothers really needs in order to start getting close to recouping all this money. If you're paying, $40, $50 a person a month, not a family, but a person a month, and then suddenly they're back up to those box office numbers. I mean, I just don't see that happening. So what this means is that, and I know there's been a lot of op-eds about this, fewer tent poles, because there's not going to be the money to make them. And also just general overall, movies are going to have to become cheaper. And what that means for movie studios and movie actors and all the special effects and everything that goes along with it, we'll see what happens. So anyways. All right, last piece of news. Vincent Teo from the HD TV Test reviewed Sony's new $20,000 VW915ES projector. Why won't they just give it just call it Sally or something? I mean, why does it have to be so stupidly long? And what VW? I mean, what is it? A small car?
I mean, I left off the VPL dash that comes before that just to make it shorter for you.
Anyways, he discovered that it does not actually have frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping as we had assumed based on the pre-release marketing. Instead, the dynamic HDR enhancer is just an altered electro optical transfer function that makes darks look darker and brights look brighter. So this does not put Sony on equal footing with JVC as we had anticipated. So JVC is still kind of the leader right now.
Definitely, yeah. No frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping on Sony's new projectors. That's disappointing. It certainly sounded like that's what they were marketing. But yes, Vincent Tio has thoroughly tested it. Now that is the $20,000 laser light engine one. They have their $10,000, what is it, VW 815? Yes? I'm forgetting the model number offhand, but whatever the one step down that is $10,000 that uses a lamp instead of lasers as the light engine. Similar thing there. They never touted anything about dynamic HDR enhancer for their $5,000 model. That remains the 295 ES. But yeah, if you want frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping where it ignores the HDR10 metadata and just analyzes the signal itself inside of the display, you're sticking with JVC, possibly LG with their Cinebeam models too.
Some comments here from listeners. Dan heard us mentioning the black level advantages of OLED over LCD. He has a Samsung QLED, and sure enough, he can spot some blooming in the black bar sometimes, and sometimes things that should be pure black are dark gray instead. But he installed a bias light behind his TV, and wow, what a huge difference that makes. He knows the TV itself didn't change, but the black levels seem better, and he doesn't feel eye strain anymore. So yes, a difference exists, but his eyes don't care if a simple bias light means he can't notice it. So those who don't know, a bias light is just a light that you put behind your display or behind your screen that sort of gives off a little bit of a glow. And that glow should be a neutral color, even though you'll see the things on Amazon and Facebook, particularly lately on Facebook, where it if there's a light near the screen, it explodes out, and everybody's like, "Oh, it's so exciting! It's so amazing! It's so..." Shut up! You're ruining everything. You're doing home theater wrong.
Biases your eye, oversaturates that particular color in your eye and makes you perceive the colors incorrectly. So yes, you just want a neutral D65 white light coming up from behind your screen. I mean, it's a good point, Dan. We can do a better job of mentioning how bias lighting really can help, particularly in your perception of the contrast and black levels.
It doesn't actually change the black levels, and that's the point that when people ask us which has the best black levels, we answer the question. We don't say, well, this one's technically better, but if you get a bias light, then you won't notice a difference. I mean, it should be something that we mentioned.
I have a very good LCD TV, a Z9D Sony with their backlight master drive, still remains one of the highest full array local dimming zone counts, still one of the best performing LCDs that's been ever made. I also have an OLED, so since I have that comparison that I can make in my own place just by walking from my living room to my theater and quickly see, it's like, yeah, when you see them side by side in quick succession, the OLED, doesn't matter if you got bias lighting or not, the OLED still looks better. It still has that advantage. But when you have a very good LCD, that is your only display, you are not comparing it side by side or back to back with an OLED, then yes, having that bias lighting can definitely make your perception of it that, hey, those blacks are inky black, the contrast looks fantastic. So yeah, that's a good point, Dan, and I'll try to do a better job of mentioning bias lighting.
I will not, though. I should remember to write an article about bias lighting. Hold on a second. Let me write that down.
Notes to Tom, avgadgets.com. Talk about bias lighting.
Yeah. Done right. You guys think I'm joking. I'm actually typing that out. All right, Nick heard us talking to Jack last week, and Jack's setup sounds very similar to Nick's. Nick also has a BenQ HT5550 projector, also 14 feet from the screen, and also with a heat register directly in front of it on the ceiling. In Nick's case, it's only 5 inches to 6 inches in front. He hasn't had any problems as far as the BenQ overheating, but with the heat register that close and directly in front of the BenQ lens, the heat alone does distort the image. It gets wavy when the heat kicks on.
Infrared.
Of course, Jack lives in the Arctic, and he has connected directly up to a geothermal vent. So maybe it's one use case. Anyways, the waves go away when the heat kicks off, so it's definitely the cause. So if Jack's heat register is equally close, Nick thinks it would be the best to move it while the drywall is still open. Also, the biggest issue is noise traveling through the ductwork, so be mindful to consider soundproofing, the soundproofing situation as well. So that is an interesting observation. I would not have guessed that. I have AC and I have ductwork right to the side, like 6, maybe 10 inches to the right of my projector that kind of points straight out and to the side. So it definitely kind of goes into the projector, but I've never noticed anything like that. And of course, the projector sits proud of it by a foot or more, 2 feet maybe. So I've never had that issue, but that's good to know that it's possible.
Yeah.
I am shocked, but I'm good to know it's possible.
Yeah, no, I can see it happening with the. I mean, they look out on a hot day above a road or something. You see those wavy lines from the infrared.
But that's like 110
it.
degrees or more.
I guess some of it depends on what type of HVAC system you have. Some come out at a higher temperature at a lower velocity versus coming out at a lower temperature at a higher velocity or something like that.
I would think that it would be lower temperature, higher velocity based on the fact that he's complaining about noise. So
no, that's noise from his theater getting into the ducts into the rest of the house. That's
that other direction. Yeah. Okay, all right. Nathan says, thanks for the reality check regarding his friends who are moving to Greece and wanted the projection set up and all in-ceiling speakers for $3,000. Nathan is going to wait for his friends to send him the plans and drawings for the house in Greece before making any further recommendations. But our output did convince them to increase their budget to $5,000. Well, you're getting closer. The ALR screen actually seems like it'll be really worth it. That's
ambient light rejecting.
Yeah. Ambient light rejecting. I don't know why I couldn't make that work in my head all of a sudden. And there's a chance a lot of the construction will end up being concrete, so trying to make everything in ceiling or in wall might be a challenge. So more to come. Yeah, so I don't know what part of Greece they're living in, but that is the case sometimes, in certain areas of Greece that I've been in where it's clear that all the, everything's
concrete.
Yeah,
cement.
There's no drywall anywhere.
If there's anywhere on that front wall, which will have big picture windows, but if there's anywhere that you can mount on-wall speakers, have them take a look at Klipsch's on-wall speakers. They're Reference Premier on-wall speakers. They're very stylish. They're very slim, and they have the efficiency and output capability that even with a very entry-level AV receiver, they will be able to fill even a large room with sound, being Klipsch and their horn-loaded design. So that was something to consider. Maybe Kef's T series as well, although they're not quite as efficient, but they are the skinniest and most blend-inable on-walls that kind of exist. Yeah.
Right. So Gurinder just wanted to warn others that even though we said cutting insulation into triangles to make super chunks would be fewer cuts and less waste material, it can still get pretty messy. He knows from experience. Yeah. You know what I'll tell people, and this is something we should have mentioned before, a lot of people suggest cutting using a butter knife or something to cut this stuff, and that works. But if you're planning on hanging these things as pictures, and you've got some picture hanging wire.
Oh, yeah.
The wire, actually, if you just cut yourself and make some handles on either side, cut yourself a long piece and make some handles on either side, just like a garage.
Yes,
I know,
that's right.
It goes right through. It actually works really well, and therefore you don't have to draw lines and follow lines. You just stack it up, put a tick mark on either side, and just go straight down, and then you get a perfectly straight line. So, and then the corners, of course, came out straight too. Now, of course, do all this outside. Do not cut inside.
It's like using dental floss to slice a hard-boiled egg.
Right, or a little wire to cut I was going to say eggs too, but cheese. There you go. All right, some questions. We got Greg from Ontario, Canada. Do we like Ontario, Rob? How do we feel about Ontario?
Being in Vancouver, if he's Toronto, then we've got beef, because, Toronto's the center of the universe is the joke in the rest of Canada. So,
is it because of their team? Their hockey team?
It's easy to make fun of the Maple Leafs, so that's okay. They keep spending the money and they never win, so that's fun to see in the rest of Canada.
This is great. This is Rob Trash Talking. Can we let's just call this one Rob Trash Talks?
We sure
That's
can.
That's the name of this episode. There we go. Rob Trash Talks Ontario. Suck it, Maple Leafs. That's the title. Anyways, Greg is finally about to finish his basement home theater. Time is more available than money right now, and he's a Finnish carpenter by trade. Hey, buddy, you're a good person to know when send me some things, because I need some stuff. So he doesn't mind putting in some DIY work. He's got a bunch of Polk RM1300 satellite speakers on hand, so he plans to use them as surrounds, backs, and 4 Atmos overheads. He was thinking he could build recessed boxes into his ceiling, mount the Polk satellites inside those boxes, and then cover the fronts with acoustically transparent material. Is there any reason he should avoid doing this, or will it work just fine? Those Polks, are they ported?
Oh, shoot, I didn't check on that part. They are very compact. You definitely... So...
I'll check. There's go ahead and talk.
There's no physical reason why you could not do this. The only thing, and I'm pretty sure being a carpenter by trade, he would be aware of this to check. But the only thing is, will those backer boxes, will those holes in your ceiling be opening you into an area of your house where you need to have a fire break, a proper fire code? Now, I mean, that can still be done. Obviously, you can have
recessed. If he just builds a box that's in closed, it should be.
That's
fine.
right. Yeah. So, but just make sure that you're at least adhering to fire safety code. That's the only thing that's going to be a concern as far as that goes. But yeah, there's no real reason why you can't take a satellite speaker and put it into a box that you have constructed that is recessed into your ceiling. That'll be fine.
Right. I guess, but so I don't see any ports on them, so it doesn't look like that's going to be any
even
sort
if they
of
did,
issue.
as long as you have insulated inside of that recessed box and make the box a reasonable size.
That's the two things I would consider. Three things actually. Make the box a big enough size that you can get some insulation and stuff in there, so that it's not you're not turning it into a horn essentially. And I would try to get to plan, and you're a finished carpenter, so it shouldn't be a problem for you. Plan so that if you're going to put speaker grill cloth or something on the front of this box, so that the front of your speaker basically touches that speaker grill cloth, so that you're I would rather you be proud of the outside of the box, but since I know you're not going to do that, then that's fine.
I mean, you could, because you can actually put like a visible trim frame as a little square around where the speaker is, and that could protrude just a little bit from the actual flush part of the ceiling, and that way the very front of the speaker could be ever so slightly proud of the actual ceiling, and then you just sort of have like a trim frame with the fabric on it to cover over the front. So yeah, that can all be done.
Yeah, so I would insulate, and then make sure that you're as far forward as you can possibly be. Those were the only two things I would be concerned about, and I see no issue with that. If you got your mount, whatever the mount is, I think it has keyholes on the back, or it has the ability to be keyhole mounted, and then you build your box and just install the box in the ceiling. I mean, I don't see any problems with this. All right, Timothy and Brandon. So these guys are brothers or something?
Yeah, just asking very similar questions.
I know. I got it, Rob.
I'm explaining for the people who, maybe they don't get the sarcasm.
I know. The sarcasm. It's a blessing and a curse, Rob. Mostly a curse. All right, Timothy already had an SVS PC13 Ultra cylinder sub. Then he bought an SB16 Ultra to pair with it, diagonally opposite corners of his theater area. But he's in an open space, and he's decided he favors sheer output more than even uniformity. So he'd like to co-locate his two subs, and he's saying side by side, even though he could technically stack them. You could put
theoretically possible, I suppose,
the PC on top of the SB. Let's be honest here. You could stack them. It would be ludicrous and awesome, and I want a picture. Please. Should it put the PC13 Ultra into a sealed mode since it only has that option? I mean, since it has that option, it only has that option.
The PC13 Ultra, the cylinder, you have 3 different tunings. You can have all the ports open. You can have... is it 1 or 2? I think it's only one of the ports closed, which reduces your output a little bit, adds a little bit deeper extension down to 16 hertz. Or you can seal up all the ports in the PC13 Ultra. The SB16 Ultra, of course, is sealed all the time. It does not have any ports, so no options on that one. So yeah, should he turn his PC13 Ultra into a sealed subwoofer? I mean,
I don't think so. I mean, I wouldn't, but you could, I guess, try it and see how you like it.
Yeah, I mean, the question is, are you bumping up against the output limits of your SB16 Ultra? Because with the PC13 Ultra in sealed mode, it is approximately 3 decibels quieter than the SB16 Ultra pretty much across the board. Once you put the PC13 Ultra into sealed mode, it now has a very similar roll-off on the low end to the SB16 Ultra, which is that it begins to roll off at about 40 hertz, but at a very shallow roll-off, closer to the 12 decibels per octave than the 24 decibels per octave of a ported sub. But it's basically about 3 decibels quieter across the board. So if you aren't really coming that close to using the full output of the SB16 Ultra and 3 decibels quieter, and then putting them together co-located gives you +6, well, then that means you're going to have very similar roll-off profiles. The frequency response, the shape of the graph is going to look very similar with them both in sealed mode. Now, if you leave the PC13 Ultra cylinder ported, probably putting it into extended mode, then it's actually going to be like louder than the SB16 Ultra at 20 hertz and at 16 hertz, but then it's going to kind of drop off a cliff, and it doesn't have any output down at 10 hertz, whereas the SB16 Ultra still does. So the shapes are different, and it actually has more output than the SB16 Ultra at 20 hertz and 16 hertz. Right. I don't know. I mean, the answer is try both, see if there's a preference. My inclination would probably be to seal it so that they're reacting more similarly in terms of the shape. Like that way you're not having some like weird humps potentially. With anything.
I mean, even if he's bumping into the upper limits of the SB 16, by co-locating them, you're going to get more basically more output. So maybe that makes it so the SB doesn't have to play as loud, therefore, to get the same output. So
neither of these subs
no longer
is
bumping it.
ever going to break itself. So, giving it a try.
I would do both. I would definitely do both.
Yeah.
I mean, my inclination would be, because I mean, the kind of rule of thumb is ported. If you have two subs that are basic, like in SVS's lineup, that are the same model, numbers or whatever, but one's ported and one's sealed, the ported plays louder than the sealed. The sealed doesn't have as much at the low frequencies, but the sealed has a more gentle roll off at the end, whereas the PB, where the ported ones will be louder and then suddenly stop playing. Yeah. Which is fine. There's nothing wrong with either one of these designs. It's just sort of a limitation of the design itself. Now you ask yourself, if he really cares about output more than anything, well then leaving it in ported mode is the way to go, because where they are different is subsonic.
True.
So you're not talking about like you're going to hear different bass because they have a different roll off.
Yeah,
it might feel a little different. It might not feel exactly. Only one sub is giving you the feels.
Yeah. If the goal is sheer maximum output, then you're right. Leaving the PC13 Ultra in its extended mode, where two of its ports are still open, that will mean maximum output to the greatest range of frequencies with the two subs side by side. Yeah, that's reasoned out well. No.
But, this is a perfect example of you can make the exact same argument the opposite direction based on what your goals are.
Sure.
So if your goals were, I want the two subs to work in harmony together as, to match as well as possible, well, then you would seal
correct
the other one and then just turn it up 3 dB, basically, in order to get them to be about the same volume. So Brandon wants to know which has higher output, the PB4000 or the SB16 Ultra, and how do you figure that out? So the PB4000 is like, isn't the 4000 the newer version of the 16s? Is that?
No, it's the newer version of the 13s, right? So the 13 Ultras became the 4000s. Yeah.
So you're going to see the same thing that we were just talking about, which is the PB is going to play higher at lower volumes, but the 16 is going to roll off less steeply.
Yeah.
At the end.
Yeah, what you want to look for, like the easiest way to compare is something that is a standardized test. So the CEA 2010 burst tests and prolonged tests, that is at least a standardized testing procedure. You do have to be mindful of, are they referencing it to the microphone being 1 meter away or 2 meters away? Because, of course, that makes a big difference. It's actually a 9 decibel difference, depending on where they've referenced the distance of the microphone. But in this case, when you're talking about a PB4000 and SB16 Ultra, Audioholics has measured both of these, and they always reference to the microphone being 2 meters away, so it's like to like. And there, you'll find from 40 hertz on up, they're almost the same. The PB4000 measured 1 decibel louder from 40 hertz on up versus the SB16 Ultra. But at 20 hertz, the SB16 Ultra is outputting 100 decibels with the microphone 2 meters away, whereas the PB4000 in its extended mode, where it's loudest down at 20 hertz and 16 hertz, is up at 109 decibels. So considerably louder at 20 hertz. Down at 16 hertz, we're talking, 99 dB coming out of the PB4000 at 16 hertz, whereas it's 95 dB coming out of the SB16 Ultra. Again, you're seeing the slopes difference there, where the SB16 Ultra has gotten quieter, but not quite as quickly, whereas the PB is starting to roll off more quickly. But 20 hertz is the big difference. 100 dB of the sealed larger driver but sealed versus the smaller driver but ported. 9 decibel difference there at 20 hertz. But yeah, the CEA 2020 measurements let you compare like to like.
Yeah, and that's one of the great things about having measurements like this where you can compare them together. Because for the longest time, all we had was manufacturer's claims, and manufacturer's claims could be anything, especially when you had, who was it, Paradigm or one of those guys who would
DIN.
do like the room. The DIN,
that's Paradigm,
right?
all right.
The DIN,
the
whatever.
German
it's like everybody's like,
that nobody else
what
uses.
is that? It's like it doesn't compare to anything else, basically.
Pretty much the minus 10 dB point is what you're looking at there, but it's a little bit squiggly. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. New question. So those were two different people with the same-ish question. So we're now on to Nathan. Nathan's friend bought an ultra short throw projector, something I still have a hard time saying. The Vava 4K model. It has speakers built in. This friend also got a Yamaha TSR 700 receiver from Costco, which is their special model number for the RX V6A. So it's a Yamaha receiver. Mm-hmm. Apparently, this friend intends to eventually buy a full surround sound speaker setup, but for the moment, he just has 2 speakers on hand. Nathan has tried to convince this friend to just run stereo with a Phantom Center, but since the Vava projector touts its Harman Kardon built-in speakers, and the ultra short throw design means the projector is sitting right where the center speaker would normally go, the friend wants to use the Vava as a center speaker. It's absolutely atrocious idea.
Don't do this, but we'll go through it a little bit.
Don't do it. I mean, it's literally the worst idea. I mean, it's just terrible. It's akin to saying, I've got these 2 bookshelf speakers, and I don't even care what the quality of the bookshelf speakers are, and I'm gonna put my phone in the center and use it as a center channel. Like that is the difference in quality you're talking about. I'm going to use my phone, and I'm going to put it in a cup, a solo cup, so they'll boost the bass output. All right. Vava just says it has a 3.5 AV analog input. It also has HDMI inputs, of course, but that's it. And the Yamaha has full left-right pre-outs and the subwoofer pre-outs, but that's it. No other pre-outs. So is it even possible? Nathan is envisioning taking the center channel speaker wire, converting that to line level with an adapter, and then using an HDMI audio injector? Really? Whereas apparently his friend just wants to get a speaker wire to 3.5 millimeter car audio cable and plug that straight into Vava, which has Nathan concerned. What do we say? I think you need a new friend, son.
I mean, what your friend wants to do just flat out won't work, because the 3.5 millimeter input is a video audio input. It's the yellow, red, white, three cables that were used to just converted to a 3.5 millimeter. So you can't input that as your audio source and then have one of the HDMI sources as the video. Doesn't do that. It's one or the other. So his idea won't work. Plus, it's a terrible idea. You don't want to take a fully amplified signal and just put it into a speaker wired a 3.5 millimeter cable and just plug that on in. No, I mean, if he wants to damage the 3.5 millimeter input on his Vava, then it's his purchase. He can go ahead and do that, I suppose, but that is a horrible idea. But this whole thing is a bad idea. You, Nathan, are correct. Just run it in stereo. You got 2 bookshelf speakers and a Yamaha receiver. Set it up as stereo. You'll have a lovely Phantom Center, and that's all that needs to be done here. If the friend cannot be convinced, you have done your duty, more than your duty. You have tried to convince him to do the correct thing. Absolutely do not go trying to mess with HDMI audio injectors and speaker wire to line them. I mean, what's the...
It's going to be so expensive.
If you do that, just buy a center speaker. Spend the money.
That's right. At that point, you might as well. Yeah. It's a lot cheaper. If you want to save your friend all this hassle, do you have a center channel or just a speaker lying around that you're not using? Just give him that.
He's got the Yamaha receiver already. Just connect a center speaker. Done.
Yeah, literally anything would be better than this. Anything would be better than this. So explain to him that you can either have the video coming from that yellow cable, which is going to be awful, or you can have the video from the HDMI, because whatever the video comes from, that's where the audio is coming from. Right. So if he tries to plug in the red and white ones, it may send audio into there, and at the amplified level it's sending it in, it may blow up his brand new projector. But he won't hear audio. He might hear hissing and smoking and crackling as things catch on fire, but he won't hear audio. The audio has to come from the HDMI. Now, he may say, that's fine. I'll just use that. And so then he's going to have left and right coming from his left speaker, his right speaker, plus both left and right coming from his...
Right, it'll be duplicated coming out of the projector.
It'll be duplicated up front, which... I mean, it'll end up being mono, but you'll end up with the information that's not supposed to be there also being there, and then there may even be sync issues that are going on there. So the audio that's coming out of the projector might be differently synced than the audio that's coming out of the speakers.
Tiniest little echo going on.
Yeah, it just might sound a little weird. Have him try it. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? He could like it. I mean, it's fine if he likes it.
You could have the speaker wire going to the bookshelf speakers as normal, front, left, right, and then you could use those front, left, right pre-outs to feed the VAVA. And now both the VAVA and the bookshelf speakers are getting the same audio signal. If that'll function. If you just want sound to come out of his VAVA projector, then do it that way. See how it goes.
Right, but how would he... What? How would he...
Because it would just be left-right pre-outs feeding the VAVA.
Oh, right. Yeah, but then he'd have to be...
he'd have to use the yellow... Yeah, you'd have to use the yellow video cable. I mean, that's what he wants to do. So there you go.
Yeah, then he could have 480i.
Yeah.
The wonderful world of 480i. So, yeah, that'll be worth it, I guess. Brendan in Australia. Brendan's room is 21 feet wide by 16 feet long. Thank you for doing the conversion, whoever did the conversion for me. So
meters. It definitely came in.
He gave you centimeters, right? Yeah, okay. His main couch is away from the back wall and about 9.5 feet from the TV. So he's 9.5 feet from a 65-inch Sony OLED. So in case you're wondering, that is not a big enough screen. But let's go on. He's got a 7.1 speaker setup with all Paradigm Studio speakers plus Paradigm Millennia surround backs and a Martin Logan Dynamo subwoofer. It's a sealed 12-inch and claims 22 hertz at -dB, which is something that sounds kind of reasonable, on top of a subdued isolation riser. Okay. All the surfaces are hard. There are bookcases to the left and the right of the TV on the front wall. The floor is wood, and most of the left wall is the glass doors that out to the deck with windows on either side, which are not going to get covered or have anything standing in front of them since they are constantly used. The room can be closed off from the rest of the house by a door. Okay. So on the front wall, there are bookshelves to the right and left, and they are very close. So he's got a cabinet underneath the TV. And then he's got the bookshelves butting right up to that cabinet. There's probably a space of about maybe 1.5 to 2 feet, at least from what I see on the right side of the TV. I can't see the left. The left side's about the same. Yeah. And his speakers are in front of the bookshelf because they are on the outside of the component cabinet there. And he's got a nice big space for a bigger TV if he ever wanted to use such a thing. He could,
yes.
Behind him is a blank white wall with small windows up near the ceiling, and way, way, way on the outside, almost in the corners, are his surround back speakers.
Yeah, those are surround backs, because his surrounds are on stands to the left and right of his seats.
Which are, nice. It would be nice if those are a little wide for the surround backs, but okay, it can't be helped. We are where we are. And like he said, the left wall is almost all sliding glass doors. But it looks like, I bet what those are those massive accordion doors, as I bet what those are. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they slide. Okay, doesn't matter. All right. He wants to improve his listening experience. In particular, his wife often asks him to turn it up as she cannot hear the dialogue clearly, even though his Yamaha receiver is cranked up pretty high. So I just wrote an article about this, and that white wall behind you is begging. Are acoustic panels the solution? He isn't sure if aesthetics will limit him to only a few panels, and as mentioned, the side walls aren't really even an option. Would panels just on the bare wall at the back be a help? And if so, do we know a place to buy panels in Australia? He isn't against DIY, but he'd be quite happy to buy some if they're reasonably priced and look decent. It's funny the words I insert into these things as I read them. I realize I'm doing it because it's like I don't even think about it. I'm just like, there should be the word quite in there. He'd be quite happy. I don't know why it's not written, but there it is. Okay, so yes, not necessarily a slap echo guaranteed, but it does look like you're getting, there's a great propensity for this. So how could you test it? I mean, you could literally test it by sitting your wife on the couch and standing behind her with like a massive comforter behind her head, and just have her watch something for a little bit and then remove the comforter, and, or, vice versa, keep, replacing it and placing it, and see if things seem to get better for her. If they seem to get better for her, and vice versa, I mean, you could do the test if you want to. That would be a way to do it. That big white wall back there, come on, man. You can't tell me you can't put something on that thing. You could put panels all the way across that thing. And I know that white is sort of the hotness and everything. I'm with you. There's no reason why you couldn't put white panels back there. Hey, man, buy some hexagonal shelves and insert the insulation in there, or literally just buy an open bookshelf, or buy a bookshelf, brace it to the wall, or secure it to the wall, and don't insert the back panel, which is just that itty bitty flimsy plywood that you get from IKEA anyways. And this, just the back of the bookshelf is all of that, and you don't just use it as like, put little
because then it
kind of
matches that you have bookshelves at the front of the room. It would make sense. You might have bookshelves at the back of the room, but the bookshelves at the back of the room will be filled with insulation and not have hard backs on them, so that they can
and you don't have to fill them all the way up, just a couple of inches, or 6 or 8 centimeters, whatever that works out to be. And Bob's your uncle. I mean, yes, I would put something in the back wall.
Definitely.
That carpet also looks very, very thin.
That does not look like a thick rug. No.
Yeah, I would consider buying a thicker rug and putting a pad underneath it. And since you don't want to put anything anyplace else, the only other place I could see something going in here is a ceiling.
The ceiling, yeah.
The ceiling could possibly be a place to find.
That can work. They have just the 2-inch, and I mean 2-inch total, spot panels that are definitely available, and they could either blend in or accent. And don't overlook that the ceiling is a place that you could treat. But yes, I do think acoustics are playing a role in here. You have very good speakers, and you have sufficient space around that center that I don't think this is any type of cupboard effect or anything like that. They're standing free, so you could also consider putting a panel behind your center speaker on that wall below your television. If there is any sort of back wave that's coming off of your front wall and muddying anything up that way, you could have a panel that goes behind the center speaker on the front wall below the TV, but I would definitely treat that back wall, and I would give some thought to putting some spot panels on the ceiling as well, and a thicker rug.
All right. So he said his frequency is quoted down to 22 hertz, but on the Martin Logan website it says 25, just so that we're all...
all right.
Yeah, just so that we're on the same page. So he says, with a second subwoofer help, he isn't interested in getting rid of his Martin Logan dynamo, but he's looked, and SVS is actually pretty reasonably priced in Australia. Is there an SVS model we would recommend that would pair well with what he has? So his room is, he didn't say how high it was, did he? It's 16 by 21.
I mean, it looks pretty standard height in the photos, so nothing looks out of place.
Well,
there.
Australia, yeah, okay. So this looks about 8, maybe 9 feet. Australia, in my experience, tend to have slightly higher ceilings than what we're used to in the United States. So I wouldn't be surprised if these were closer to 9 feet than they are to 8 feet ceilings. So he can close the room off. Is the dynamo the right sub for this room? Probably not. And since it's sealed and it's only going down to 22 hertz, and what was the amplifier power on this thing?
Are you sure you're not looking at the 10-inch model? Because he has the 12-inch model, and I'm pretty sure that one...
Am I?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that one does go down. Just to answer the question directly, the SVSs that would match most closely, if you have the 10-inch, then it would be the SB1000. If it's the 12-inch dynamo that you have, then the SB2000 is actually more capable than your 12-inch dynamo, but it would still be a reasonable match to get an SB2000. If they still have stock of the regular SB2000 and not the 2000 Pro, that would actually kind of be the closest in terms of matching. They might still have some from the Black Friday sale if that went on in Australia as well. But it'd be one of those two, be an SB model, probably the 2000.
Well, it looks like there's like 5 different dynamo speakers.
Yeah, he's got the 12-incher anyway.
Okay, well, I don't know which one that is. Anyways, so yes, I agree with Rob. The problem with SVS is finding something that's going to match as far as its low point, because it's going to go lower
a little bit,
and that's just sort of like if you if you get used to having that lower lower frequency, you might start to think that, hey, I want to go all the way low.
But the thing is, is the subwoofer the reason why the dialogue intelligibility is? I wouldn't. Like, if you're saying,
so the answer to,
no acoustic treatments, but I add a second sub, is that going to fix the dialogue? I would highly doubt that. That would not be the case.
So would a second subwoofer help? Yes, it'll help the evenness of the bass across your depending on how you place your subs, but it should help the evenness of bass across your seated area. It will not. In order for a subwoofer to really mess up dialogue, there has to be something going seriously
egregiously wrong. Looking at what you have, it's not the type of problem that you would not have noticed by now. You would have already tried to do something about it if the subwoofer is the problem for not being able to hear dialogue. So it would be like it would be like so loud, such a huge peak that it's blocking out the voices. That's right.
Yeah, you're covering your ears at that point. So it will help your bass, but it won't help your dialogue. So dialogue is definitely going to be the acoustic panels. He asked anything else we've spotted that would improve his listening experience. So the only thing I could think of looking at your room right here, other than just adding more acoustic panels, you've set up things pretty well. I wouldn't hate the idea of taking your surround backs and moving them, like getting like prime elevation speakers and moving them in from your wall so that they're in line with your main speakers. I think that would give you better separation as far as the pans.
So that would mean having to lower them below those skinny windows that he's got. Is that what you're?
You think so? I don't think so. I think there's enough room above them for the prime elevation speakers.
Okay.
Yes.
Above the
I would
windows.
put them right up there on the ceiling. Okay. Yeah, I would. And even if there wasn't, I would literally put them on the ceiling. Okay. So I don't know how he's got the wires run to those things.
You could actually potentially put them like really close together, almost like a mono surround back speaker, like the THX setup, so that if you want to keep them at the same height and vertical as they are now, they could go on the insides of the skinny windows and just be very close together.
My concern is that you end up with a slap echo off the front of the room because there's nothing up there to stop this from happening. And then you'll have a surround back image that's coming from in front of you. Which used to happen in 6.1 systems. So we're just talking about considerations here. The other thing I would look at is I can't tell based on these pictures if there's any adjustment as far as the angle of the center channel that you could do to angle it towards you a little bit more, maybe just a slight bit up.
It looks like it's tilted already, and the Paradigm does come with a cradle that you can adjust that tilt. But it looks like it's got
so that might be a way of adjusting it, and I may even suggest adjusting it down slightly. And I know that sounds weird, but you would be then off axis from the tweeter. And the tweeter, you would be above the tweeter slightly as far as the direct line of sight. That may help with the slap echo that we're talking about.
Yeah, because you've only got one row of seats to worry about, and it's a low back. So yeah.
And the thing you've got in front of you right now, it looks like it's a wooden frame of with a glass top coffee table there. That's what it looks like. I might just as a test, while you're doing all these things, throw a comforter on top of that thing and see if that makes any difference. Because it could be that you're getting a reflection off the top of that table that's hitting your ears and messing up your dialogue intelligibility. Remember, dialogue intelligibility, a lot of times it's not what you think. Your brain just can't figure out what it's supposed to be paying attention to. So the slap echo off the back wall, the echo, the first reflection points that come to you, the fact that they come at slightly different times, but not so great a different time that your brain says, oh, I don't need to pay attention to this one. I need to pay attention to this main one, which is why we put acoustic panels there, not because the reflections stop happening, which some frequencies they do, but for most the echo still happens. It's just at such a reduced volume that your brain says, don't need to pay attention to that one. The direct sound is the one I need to pay attention to, and therefore suddenly your dialogue intelligibility goes up. So we're looking for ways of tamping down the intensity of the sound as it reflects around your room as much as possible. So those are my suggestions. You got any additional ones?
I agree with all of those, and I think that covers it.
All right. Joe's been into home theater for a long time, but for the first time in his life, he's finally going to have a dedicated home theater room that he can completely black out, and that means he'll be getting his first projector.
Yay! Congratulations.
But which one and which screen? His budget for projector and screen together is $4,000. So naturally, he thought of the Epson 5050 UB, but his room is going to be wider than it is long, 70 feet long by 26 feet wide. And the ceiling is sloped down at the back. Most of the ceiling is 8 feet, but starting at about the 13.5 foot mark from the front wall, it starts to slope down until it's only 6 feet at the back wall. It sounds like he's in the attic.
Yeah.
But he has it in mind to sit 13 feet from a 135-inch screen.
I'll make a little
screen.
mention of that. Yeah.
It's a big screen, but okay. So can the Epson 5050 UB even physically fit for the screen size that he wants? He's thinking that with the ceiling mount, it needs to go just in front of the 13.5 foot mark where the ceiling starts to slope down. It seems like the 5050 UB needs to be farther back than that for the 135-inch screen. So is there a projector with a shorter throw that we would recommend? 135 at 13.5 seems like it's going to be super duper wide, super duper big.
Yeah, that will. Well, no, I mean the in terms of field of view, that would be fine. But to get to the projector to throw a 135-inch screen, the Epson 5050 needs to be farther back than what is available. In fact, yeah, it needs to be like closer to its lens being about 15 feet away from the screen, so that this just isn't really going to work very well in your room. So first of all, I'll suggest that the projector that physically is going to work well in your room and has performance that is not exactly up to the Epson 5050 UB, but it's pretty comparable and it checks a lot of the other boxes, is BenQ's HT 5550. So don't get it confused with the 5050 UB. It is an HT 5550 from BenQ. That is a DLP instead of LCD, but it's a very, very good one, and it has a shorter throw. Now, its lens would need to be right at about 13.5 feet from the screen, but you got to remember there's a slightly more than 1 foot deep body on the projector. Right. So, I mean, that could work as the ceiling is sloping. It might be down a little bit, but it's all a little bit tight. And honestly, what I think would work better, now this works better for the projector in terms of having a nice bright image that still looks different in HDR than it does in SDR. This works better for the throw distances that you have available to you with this room setup. It's going to decrease the price a little bit, and like everything works out better if you sit, instead of 13 feet away, 12 feet away from a 120-inch screen, which is very doable. That'll keep the field of view very, very similar to what you had worked out with 135 at 13 feet. 120-inch screen from 12 feet away. Now your projector's lens on that BenQ HT 5550 can throw a 120-inch image with the lens about 12 feet away, which means that the body of the projector now fits into where your ceiling is still at the full 8-foot height. You're not having to worry about, is it going to bump into where the ceiling starts to slope down? Just everything works out better if you do that change.
It's so funny how, people get set on where they're going to put their seats.
Right.
And then they try to make everything else work around it. Like, I want to know, where can I put my projector? And then what screen size could it shoot? And then where do I want? I go the exact opposite direction. Right. If my chair is, and I know what happens is you go in the room and you say, I want my chair to be right there. Well, that, I do the same thing you do, but then I look at that chair and I look at the screen and I'm like, oh, wait, that's not going to work, for whatever reasons. And then I go back to looking at the display. So, if we look at it from not from where is the chair going to be to what screen size can I get in here? Sure. What's the maximum? And then where do I want to sit in relation to a screen that's that size? So let's say in your case, you got a 120-inch screen. Right. In this case, a 120-inch screen is sort of the good biggest screen size you can get.
Everything works so nicely there. The height of the screen is such that you can put your center speaker below it without it being too low. Whereas 135, you're starting to get kind of close to that center being on the ground. So I far prefer that you choose the 120-inch screens compared to every flat panel that you've been watching till now. It's going to look huge to you, and that is what you're going for.
Well, but by the fact that you've moved and just moving your chairs closer mean that the field of view has not changed. Right. I know that physically the screen is smaller, but to your eyes it is not. Yeah. So we asked which screen should he get, and we're almost always going to say, what's it called? Screen Innovate. What's it called?
Silver
ticket. That's it.
Yeah, definitely not
I
going
don't
to
know
go
why
to
I was saying
thousands of
Screen
dollars.
Innovations. I just completely brain farted on it. But the same one I have.
He said he can have a dedicated room with a completely blacked out theater. That means you can save yourself a heck of a lot of money on the screen while getting stellar performance by going with a silver ticket, just a fixed frame, white silver ticket screen, $250 for the 120-inch size, which is great because the BenQ HD 5550 is a little bit more expensive than the 5050 UB, but it's right at about $3,000. So screen and projector together, plus a ceiling mount. We've come in well under your $4,000 budget. That's going to work out really nicely. Get the 120-inch size.
Yeah. So he says, what about 2.35 to 1 instead of 16.9?
No.
And I'm going to say once again, for the upteenth millionth time. In fact, I just wrote an article on AV Gadgets about why 6x9 is the 16 by 9 is the best screen projector aspect ratio, because this question comes out so often.
I know. I get where people are coming from. They see that CinemaScope extra wide screen. They're like, oh, that's going to look so nice. Not all of your content is in that. Do you really want to have the tops and bottoms of a lot of your content just gone, cut off, potentially,
right,
if you haven't put velvet on those areas, actually throwing light up there and distracting you above and below the screen? Or you're going to shrink the image down and then have, like, not black, just blank screen on the left and right, creating your pillar boxes. It's just, don't deal with any of that nonsense. Just get the 16 by 9 screen. That's the way to go.
So what I said in this article is, if you want to do it right, you get the anamorphic lens thing, and then you end up with, when you hit that IMAX scene in The Dark Knight, it gets squished and stretched out for no reason, right? Or you end up like what Rob was saying, you overshoot and suddenly the top and the bottom are cut off.
Yeah.
So if you're really wanting to have like this really impressive, and this is the thing that anamorphic lens guys will not tell you, which is, it's cool because you can hear the anamorphic lens slide into place, and you can, it does all the stuff it's supposed to do, and all of that. But everybody else in that theater, all your friends, your family, are like, what is that sound? What am I hearing? What's going on, right? This doesn't make any sense. And you have to explain why something is cool. If you have to explain why something is cool, it's not cool. It's not cool. But instead, if you go to like Seymour, if you want to spend the money, go to Seymour AV and get one of the motorized masking systems.
Oh, sure.
And then as you go to the
that would blow his
2.35
budget.
to 1,
he could actually go with the manual masking. If you really want to, you could go to Seymour AV, and within your budget, you could afford this. You could get the manual masking, so it's still going to be a 16 by 9 screen, but it comes with masks that attach to the top and bottom with magnets. You physically walk up there, you put up these masks on the top and bottom of your screen to turn it into 2.35 to 1 if you just really have to have it. But I mean, the black bars, the black levels on that BenQ, they're very good. It's not going to be a problem.
It won't be black, but it'll be very, very dark gray. So my point, though, was that if you're going to spend the money for an anamorphic lens, no one's going to know what it is. But if you take that same money and you apply it towards a Seymour AV screen, suddenly people are like, ooh, what is your screen doing? That's so cool. Right?
That would blow his $4,000 budget, though, the motorized ones.
Oh, I know. I wasn't talking about him. I was talking in general. Aaron is getting an APC battery backup for his gear, but this TV is wall mounted and already has an outlet up high on the wall behind it. Is there a small APC battery unit that could live behind his TV? Or he does have a conduit that he ran from his TV to his gear. The TV's own power cord wouldn't be long enough to reach through the conduit, but could he just use an extension cord? First of all, that's super against code.
Yeah, you don't want to run a power cable through an in-wall conduit.
Yeah, your house burns down and they find that and they're like, not covered. So don't do that.
Don't do that.
But I know there's small APC units, but I don't know which one.
Well, I mean, there was sort of the perfect solution.
Here we go.
Before they discontinued it. APC did have a unit called the BG500, which used a lithium-ion battery. It was only just slightly over 2 inches in depth. Like, you can mount it sideways, so it was only 2.15 inches from side to side. That was the perfect solution. It was kind of expensive. It was about $250, $275, but it's discontinued, and I just can't find anywhere to buy the darn thing anymore. There was like one outlet seller on Amazon, marketplace seller, who had like some stock last week, but I think they literally had one and it's gone at the time of this recording. So there are some alternatives. There's a company called Extreme Power. No E on that. It has to start with an X. Over at B&H Photo, you can get theirs. It's called the J60. Again, it's lithium-ion powered. It's only 1.25 inches in depth, and it's meant to be mounted behind a flat panel, but it's like $350. Crazy expensive just to have a little lithium-ion battery that can power your television and physically fit behind it. So what are some alternatives? Well, CyberPower has a unit that's only 3.2 inches in depth. The battery does not last very long. It's going to give you like 3 minutes of life on your TV, but maybe that's all you need. You just want to be able to power things down, right? I'm assuming that's what this is about. So yeah, it's only 3.2 inches, but they put the plugs on the front, so when you plug something in, now the depth is greater. It's not plugs on the side, which would have been really handy. So yeah, that one at least is affordable. The CyberPower one, it was the SE450 G1. So from APC, in terms of what you can buy right now, they do have just their regular back UPS units, like just the BN450 or 550, 650, 750, 850, depending on how much battery power you want, but they're 5.7 inches from in terms of depth, which is kind of big to go behind a flat panel, I think. So I don't know if the Extreme Power one certainly got the shallow depth that you need, but the price is insane. So, I mean, like, how badly do you really need a battery backup on your TV? Because it doesn't need to do like a cooling down cycle. It's not a projector.
Right. Well, I mean, did he say? I'm already forgotten. What kind of TV does he have?
He didn't mention exactly what it is, just that it's a flat panel that's wall mounted.
The last TVs that I really worried about having were like the rear projection TVs.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. With a lamp in them, sure.
Yeah. Most of the TVs these days are, have power. Their light sources aren't giving out the tremendous amount of heat that something like a bulb will give off, and it doesn't need to cool down quite so much. I understand you wanting to have one, and I want you to have one, but I'm thinking maybe it's not worth the money until we can find one that's
like, if what he's
price.
Like, let's say what he's concerned about is maybe he's a big time gamer. He wants to make sure that he can save his game if the power goes out. How about this as an idea? Over by your gear rack, which is separate from your TV, what if you just have a little monitor that is not normally on, but you can in the event of a power outage, you can just power it on so that you can properly close down your sources, and that just lives there with your gear.
I would be willing to bet that it costs less than $350 for somebody to install a little Romex run from the top to the bottom in your wall and do the drywall work. And you can paint it.
Yeah.
It's got to be cheaper to do that and then just have a battery backup for all your gear, which is then better.
Yeah, this is running a regular female electrical inlet that's behind your TV on the wall to or female outlet to a male inlet that lives close to your gear, and that way you can just plug a regular power cord that goes from your battery backup that lives with your gear to that male inlet, and then that just feeds via regular Romex over to the female outlet at your TV. Yeah, just pay a contractor to wire it up for you. That's going to cost less than the Extreme Power $350 lithium-ion battery.
And I don't think that you need like an electrician to do this, because it's not like going back to the junction box or anything. No. It's just a piece of Romex
inside the wall. That's right.
You could do it yourself. I mean, I don't think that there's anything here. It's essentially building an extension cord inside your wall and just using the proper wires and boxes to do it. So
agreed.
I think any old, handyman, contractor friend, handy person can do this for you. Alex got a bit lucky and came across accessories for less, selling a 5.1 pack of Focal Little Birds and their tiny subwoofer, and he grabbed them. His plan is to use his 5 main speakers right away, since he's coming from garage sale speakers. When he has saved up and buys better front 3 speakers, he'll move the Little Birds to surround and surround back duties, and eventually he'll use them as Atmos speakers. Well, that's the plan anyways. But just to quickly try Atmos, he's sitting 9 feet away from his front wall and 6 feet from his back wall with 8-foot ceilings. Could he just temporarily mount the Little Birds up high on his front and back walls, label them as heights, and aim them at his seats? Would that deliver an Atmos setup worthy of evaluation, or do they really need to be mounted on the ceiling to give Atmos a fair shake? I mean, you can do them this way.
You can absolutely do just what you said, temporary mounts high up on your walls.
Yeah.
They don't even really need to be aimed at you. Atmos isn't about that.
Yeah, it's not about that. But, just don't have them aimed at the ceiling or at the at the back wall, or the wall behind them.
Super easy to do with the little birds, though, since they easily pivot and can be aimed wherever. Totally fine to do this. I mean, I recommend when you have four overhead speakers, regardless of where they're mounted, that you label them as front heights and rear heights anyway, simply because of mostly the way DTS-X works, not the way Atmos works, but mostly the way DTS-X works, where if you label them as front heights and rear heights, as opposed to any other combination of labels, that will make the overhead sound discrete in DTS-X, whereas if you label them anything else, if you label them top fronts and top rears, DTS-X will actually put some of the overhead sound into your regular front left right and your regular surround back left right speakers. It'll put some sound into your floor level and some sound into your heights that are labeled as your overhead speakers that are labeled as tops, to try and sort of like vertically stereo locate to where heights would be, because that's what DTS-X wants to use. Whereas Atmos, if you just label them as heights, it's like, okay, you've got front left right heights and rear left right heights, and that's where the sounds are going to get steered. So it works for both formats really well if you just label them heights. By all means, do this. Don't worry about mounting them to the ceiling, just to give it a try.
Colin in Canberra. We've answered this guy before. Australia. Canberra. I think I'm saying that right. Canberra. I don't know. I can't remember. I actually never heard anybody in Australia say that word when I was there. I can't remember. Maybe I did and I just don't remember. Probably on the news.
That's strange. Canberra? I mean, it can't be.
It's where the government is, I'm pretty sure. It's kind of like they're Washington, D.C., so I can't believe I think that's right. Ooh. It's been a while since I've been in Australia. Anyways, Colin's previous standard receiver had Zone 2, and he used to have that power his Paradigm Stylus outdoor speakers on his deck, but he got a new receiver and it doesn't have Zone 2. He thought he was going to use his Sonos Move portable speaker, but he finds he doesn't really take it outside very often, and has found a sort of permanent home inside. He has an Airport Express, so he can already get the wireless signal wherever he needs it to be. He just needs an amplification for his speakers. So is there a mini stereo amplifier that would be sufficient to power his outdoor speakers? Yes. I'm sure there is.
I'm going to direct you to the same little Class D stereo amplifier that I've recommended to some UK listeners, because according to Amazon Australia, this is available in Australia as well at a pretty reasonable price, 105 Australian dollars, which is not too outlandish because a lot of things are expensive in Australia. And this is the Fosse Audio. Wonderful model name. TDA 7498E. Just rolls off the tongue, super memorable, but that is the model. It is, so they list it as 160 watts times 2. That's at 4 ohms. This is an 80 watt times 2 Class D amplifier. That's the way it should be labeled, but that's more wattage than a lot of other little Class D amplifiers at a very reasonable price. And from the one person we had right back and tell us, they said, yeah, thing works great. So you're not looking for anything spectacular here. That'll absolutely work with your Airport Express and a pretty reasonable price in Australia. You know what we forgot to do with our other Australian listener, which was, let's see, we were talking to Brendan. So if Brendan is still listening, hopefully, we didn't say where he could buy acoustic panels in Australia.
Oh, we didn't. You're right.
So I will just mention, I searched around a little bit. I mean, this is just what I can Google because I'm not in Australia. I don't really know, but there's a place called CMF Acoustics. Now, it's not exactly cheap. All right, like they're 4-inch thick panels that are 2 foot by 4 foot. They're like $150 Australian dollars, which is a little bit expensive. However, it is the type that we like where they're just using rock wool insulation. They look very nicely designed, standard colored fabrics. They do offer printing as well if you want to get printed. So it's very akin to what we normally recommend in North America. The price seems a little bit higher, but like everyone else is way higher than that. that I could easily
Australia
Google anyway.
Really pays to DIY, honestly.
Right.
I remember looking around when I was there at where, sources for rock wool and that sort of thing. And they weren't that hard to find when I was in Perth. I don't know how it is in other parts of the country, but there was definitely places to get it. And then they have their Home Depot, Bunnings or something like that. I think that's what it's called. And you could grab some wood there and it'd probably be a little bit easier. But we suggested him buying bookshelves anyway, so maybe he'll just build himself some bookshelves. Jim, So Jim's theater area is in his living room. The couch is against the back wall, which he knows is not optimal, but that's where it's staying. He has 4 in-ceiling speakers already installed, 2 directly above the couch and 2 about halfway into the room, which puts them close to a 45-degree elevation angle. The 2 pairs are both about 7 feet apart, same as the distance between his front, left, and right speakers. So he's got a Denon X3600H and has 5 floor-level speakers. His surrounds are directly to the sides of his couch. He was thinking that labeling the 4 overhead speakers as top, middles, and front heights seemed to make the most sense. But what combination of labels will actually result in the most activity happening in those overheads? Because that's what he wants. You should label the ones in front of you as front, left, and right, and then the ones above you as also front, left, and right. That will give you the most activity above you.
It's not the correct sounds, but it's the most sounds.
Yeah, though, if you just want the most sounds, you're going to want to double them up.
Just use a 5-way Y-splitter and call them all the center speaker.
They're all the center speaker.
That'll be the most sound. Okay.
No. So top, middles, front heights is pretty much your only option in this case, I think.
I mean, the weird thing is, as I just mentioned, you could actually label them front heights and rear heights. As odd as it seems to label speakers that are directly above you as rear heights, in terms of, like I said, because Atmos isn't the only immersive audio format, in terms of what DTS-X will do, if you want the most discrete overhead sounds, the correct labels to use are front height and rear height. Now, I mean, as far as Atmos is concerned with steering the speakers in that configuration, all it cares about is forward, back, left, right. And you will still get that correct steering and presentation, even though the speakers are directly above you, with them labeled as rear heights. That's going to be the rear sounds.
So I guess I have to change mine then.
I mean, give it a try. Yeah, it's right. It's right there to give it a try. Because, I mean, what DTS-X will do, if you label them as top, middles, and front heights, it'll work perfectly well, but basically everything that should have been coming out of rear heights is going to come out of your surround backs now. And you don't have surround backs, so they're actually coming out of your surround speakers, which are directly to your left and right. And that isn't quite right for where the sound should be coming from. Like, right. DTS-X doesn't steer overheads entirely correctly. But if you label them as front heights and rear heights, then that's as good as it gets. So I would give that. I mean, look, none of this is like irreversible. We're talking about settings inside of an AV receiver. So by all means, try labeling them as top, middles, and front heights. Either way, the ones in front of you are going to be front heights. That's set. But try labeling the ones that are directly above you as top, middles, see how it goes, and try labeling them as rear heights and see how that goes. We're talking about settings, so give it a try.
All right, he has backed up his collection of DVDs and Blu-rays in Plex. His LG B8 OLED has a Plex app built in, and so does his 2019 Roku Ultra. Those are also his 2 streaming device options for Netflix and Amazon Prime Video. Which surround sound output mode should he use in order to get the most activity in the overhead speakers, and is it better to use his 2019 Roku Ultra or the B8's built-in apps?
This is one of those.
I am not even going to try because I'm not even going to try.
This one is it's not the way things should be. So okay, let's deal with Plex first. Unfortunately, neither of your devices, neither the B8 OLED or the 2019 Roku Ultra, for whatever reason, it's not a hardware inability, but neither of them will send full lossless bit streams from Plex. So you cannot send Dolby True HD, you cannot send DTS HD Master Audio, and therefore you cannot send those versions of Dolby Atmos or DTS-X. So if you've done straight backups of your Blu-rays that have Atmos or DTS-X, they will be the Dolby True HD plus Atmos version or the DTS HD Master Audio plus DTS-X version. And those just cannot be sent from either your 2019 Roku Ultra or your B8 OLED, unfortunately. So, I mean, the thing is, Plex is automatically going to transcode the audio into something that those devices will output. In your case, it's probably just going to be Dolby Digital 5.1, which, I mean, your AV receiver will absolutely do a perfectly fine job of upmixing it. If you want to notice the overhead speakers more, I would suggest using the DTS Neural X upmixer rather than the Dolby Surround upmixer, because the DTS Neural X upmixer tends to goose the overhead speakers a little bit and make them more noticeable. And if you've labeled them as front heights and rear heights, they'll be the most discreet and noticeable that way. If you want the best experience from Plex, then it's time to invest in an NVIDIA Shield. And you could get the tube version. You don't have to go for the Pro, although the Pro, by all accounts, anecdotally, seems to be playing back things more smoothly than the tube. So maybe you want to spend the 50 extra bucks and get the NVIDIA Shield Pro. That is the best Plex device. Netflix is really weird on the 2019 Roku Ultra. It won't send out Atmos. There's no hardware reason why it can't, because the Roku Ultra will send Atmos from other streaming services, but not from Netflix. Nobody seems to know why. It's insane. So for Netflix, the B8 OLED's built-in Netflix app will do a better job.
That's terrible.
And Amazon Prime Video, it's a wash. So you could kind of get rid of your 2019 Roku Ultra is what I'm saying. If these are the only three apps that you use, is Netflix and Amazon Prime Video and Plex, then your Roku Ultra really isn't doing anything for you right now. The built-in apps for Netflix and Amazon Prime on your OLED are good, and if you want Plex to work properly, get an NVIDIA Shield.
There you go. Kris currently has all DefTech speakers, Mythos series for the floor level and DefTech in-ceilings for Atmos. He's considering a change/upgrade to Elac Vela series, which use Elac's jet folded ribbon tweeters. If he ends up loving them and changing all of his floor level speakers from DefTech to Mythos to Elac Vela, will he need to change his in-ceiling speakers too? If so, what should he get, since Elac doesn't seem to offer in-ceiling models with their jet tweeters? Well, obviously, the first thing I'm going to say is try it with the DefTechs. These are Atmos speakers, and I know that that's such a cop out. It feels like a cop out on our part, but the reality is there's a heavy DSP component to Atmos that they're not telling you about, and there's a very small range within the frequency response range that Atmos speakers are actually playing.
And it is non-critical sounds. This is not where your dialogue is coming from. It's mostly atmospheric sounds, as Atmos, the name would imply, or sometimes some discrete sound effects, but that's really just about, ooh, I could, something pinged around up there, or a helicopter.
So my bet is going to be, you are not going to, if you believe that you need new speakers up there, it's because you want to have new speakers up there.
Sure.
And I don't think that objectively, if you could A/B them with another, whatever we're going to recommend, which is going to have some sort of folded ribbon in it, or something like that, in order to sort of kind of match the response that you get from the Elacs. I think that if you A/B them, you would not really be able to tell the difference unless you did something weird, so that you to them in order to make sure that you were hearing things you would never actually hear during true playback. I would just plan on not upgrading the ceiling speakers and saving that money, because the speakers you're looking at are not cheap.
Indeed.
The Elac Velas are like, what, $2,500 for the towers? Like $2,500
I think
a
so.
pop?
Yeah.
They are.
I mean, they're very
not
nice
a cheap
speakers,
speaker.
but they're not cheap. I mean, my inclination to say, will you need to change your in-ceiling speakers too? No, I don't think you will. But so try it first. If you're like, yep, I have to change them. If that's what you think, I would point you to Martin Logan. I know that Golden Ear is probably one of the better known for having the folded ribbon tweeters, but Golden Ear has their own kind of sound, and Elac is more neutral, and so is Martin Logan. So as far as folded ribbon tweeter in-ceiling speakers goes, I would point you to Martin Logan. They're Electromotion IC for in-ceiling. They're $500 each. These are not cheap in-ceiling speakers.
Right.
But, hey, you're looking at...
They're a lot cheaper than the ones you're looking at for the Elacs, though.
That's right.
Oh.
Now, what I would also mention is that they have a good on-ceiling option, which is the Motion 2i. So that is one where you can just mount it with a 1/4-inch threaded insert. If you wanted to do on ceiling instead of in ceiling, those are only $200 each. So that's a considerable cost savings. It's still a lot of money for a very small little on wall speaker. But the Motion 2i is a consideration too. But Martin Logan would be the way to go. But don't do either of them. Just keep what you have as far as the in ceilings go.
Yeah, I agree. Tony recently put together his first home theater and just started listening to AVRant within the past month. Welcome, Tony. Sorry we're sucking up so much of your time, because I know that we are. Things all started when he bought a cheap projector that his kids could use outside for movie night. He ended up trading that in for a BenQ HT3550. He got a Yamaha RX V6A receiver and a 5.1.2 speaker package from RSL. From his research, supposedly this is lower end gear, but he couldn't be more excited, and he has a few questions.
You got some really nice components, Tony. That is not. I wouldn't call that entry level. I would.
No, it's not.
No,
it's not.
No.
Yeah,
that's
not.
That's very decent.
There's definitely entry level stuff, and this is not it. This is entry level if you're serious about it. This is like, entry level if you've got a lot of money and you don't want to spend it. So first of all, and I we can't stress this enough. We've all talked about this many times, even on the Thanksgiving podcast. We talked about it. We all started off with Frankenstein cheap systems that were cobbled together by what we had on hand and what we could afford. So this is way better than that.
Oh yeah.
Okay, and believe me, you've started off in a very good place. So I don't want you to do not go online and look at forums and have people tell you that your gear is entry level, because they are elitist. And I can't say the rest of it because this is a family-friendly podcast. But believe me, if you were here, well, you wouldn't be here because COVID. But if you were here and I had a beer in my hand, I would have some words for those people.
Right. Tony, if he's saying he's relatively new to home theater, he clearly researched, because you don't find these products by accident.
No, you don't.
There is no
Not
chance.
RSL. That's like completely out of left field, right?
I think he was probably reading Audioholics, because they're one of the ones who's touted RSL a lot more than other publications, and they have not steered you wrong, sir. These are very decent products. We would be happy to own and use ourselves, so there is no reason to feel like you was skimped or anything like that. Very nice choices.
So he's mostly using a 2019 Roku Ultra for streaming, which we just told you you should probably sell.
A different person.
Different person. Don't listen to us, man. We're just some guys. So he noticed that the brand new 2020 Roku Ultra specifically boasts a Dolby Atmos support. Should he assume then that his 2019 version does not? Because when he's watching movies, there is definitely sound coming out of his two overhead speakers. But is that just the Yamaha receiver doing upmixing? Well, it depends on your app.
It depends on the app. Yeah, the 2019 Roku Ultra, from a hardware standpoint, it can pass through Dolby Atmos in the Dolby Digital Plus form, which is what all of the streaming services use anyway. But it is app by app, because for whatever reason, the way that Netflix handles it, it does not pass through the 2019 Roku Ultra. But say Vudu does. If you happen to be using Vudu, then Dolby Atmos audio from Vudu works on the 2019 Roku Ultra. So it is an app by app thing. Now, if you're just like, hey, I just got this 2019 Roku Ultra, maybe I could just swap it for the 2020. The 2020 is better. The 2020 Roku Ultra is better. It does seem to support Dolby Atmos from like all the services. So if that's the way you want to go, there's an argument that can be made there. Why are you hearing sounds from your two overhead speakers right now? Your Yamaha is, like, let's say it's Netflix, where it is only sending 5.1, then yes, your Yamaha is upmixing using either the Dolby Surround Upmixer or the DTS Neural X Upmixer, either of which works perfectly fine, especially when you only have two overheads. That's what's going on there.
So since he was or is new to all of this, he put the BenQ projector on a little stand smack dab in the middle of his sectional, which he separated in the middle just enough to fit the stand and the projector. So that's probably loud and hot, but okay. He doesn't want to keep it this way permanently, so he wants to ceiling mount the projector, and he has a drop tile ceiling. So how should he go about doing the ceiling mount? He figured the mount itself should be secured to a joist above the drop tiles, right? And it's easy enough to remove a tile to do that, but then what does he do in order to replace that ceiling tile spot that now has a projector mount poking down through it? Well, I mean, I don't know, because I've never done it before. I'm looking at this, and it looks like it kind of lines up with where the tiles kind of line up with where your projector is. So I don't know, Rob, you can take us through how to do
Sure. I mean,
thing.
There are such things as like T-bar ceiling adapters where you can actually kind of hang it from the T-bars themselves, but you do have to like reinforce it, and it's a whole deal. So I agree with you that the better thing to do is just, you move a tile out of the way, you secure the ceiling mount itself to the joist. Now, one of the easier things you can do, whether this is just a cheap ceiling mount from Amazon, or if you get like the peerless ceiling mounts that we really like because they have the little worm gear adjustments that can really fine tune exactly how aligned your projector is. Over at B&H Photo, you can get the peerless ceiling mounts. It's like a 2 part system where there's the one piece that gets screwed into the joist, and then you'll have some kind of extension pole, and these are all designed to just use a 1.5-inch diameter regular plumbing pipe with like the threads on it. So you can go to any hardware store and have it cut to the length that you want. Go ahead and get a steel 1.5-inch tube.
Right.
Have it cut to the length that you need so that the projector is going to be at the correct height, and then just have them thread it, because any home hardware store can do that. It's the standard plumbing threading that you need for these. And then you'll have the actual part that, connects to your projector, and that screws on to the other end of the extension pole. So then all you really need to do is cut a hole in the correct location of the ceiling tile that you moved out of the way. You'll need to cut a slit that gets from the edge of the ceiling tile to that hole. And now you can just slip the ceiling tile back around the pole, and you just get one of the little collars that goes around any 1.5-inch diameter plumbing pipe, like, what comes out of your shower head, right? It's got the little collar that just gives you the aesthetic look that seals that, that closes up that hole. That's all you need to do.
Why would he need to do that? Why can't he just put the hole and then put the ceiling tile back in place, put the pole through, and
right,
then
yeah.
I don't think you need the slit, right? If you cut the hole in the right place,
it can be a little bit. Well, yeah. It might take some dexterity, but you kind of put the pole through the hole, then you got to screw it into the part that's screwed into the joist, and then get the ceiling.
Or you put the pole in place and slide the. Actually, you push the thing all the way up to the wherever you're attaching it to the ceiling, and then you attach the pole and just let it fall back down. It should fall right in place.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, you got to get it all aligned.
I don't think he needs a slit. Yeah. Anyways, the hard part is cutting the hole in the right place.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. That's
very
the hard
careful
bit.
measurement.
But from there, you've got options.
That's right. But yeah, that's the procedure.
So he asks, how much of an improvement will it be if he gets a screen? He's just projecting onto a light gray wall right now since he's in the basement. If he turns the lights off, it can basically get pitch black. But he won't be repainting the room or replacing the carpet, so it remains white and light gray in here. And he'd love to be able to have just a little bit of light on. So would an ambient light rejecting screen be the way to go? What impact do ALR screens have on the colors? Your gray screen has more impact on the colors than the ALR.
The gray wall at the moment. I would just get a screen.
I would just get a straight up, silver ticket white screen, throw it on that wall. It's got, depending on the screen size that you're looking at, it's less than $200, which is probably less than you've spent on almost anything in this whole system. And it will make a difference. It'll give you a nice, clean black edge to everything. You'll be projecting on a nice flat surface, and you'll be getting true colors back at you and not affected by the wall behind it.
Yeah.
What I often say, if you want to see how not flat your walls are,
right.
Project an image on it.
Yeah.
You want to see how not white your white walls are? Project an image on it, and suddenly yellows are not yellow and stuff like that. So yeah, silver ticket's the way to go.
Oh yeah, like he's saying he's already impressed with the image with the way things are, and I don't blame you, because if you're coming to it new, it is a very impressive thing just to see it whatsoever. If you are happy with the way things look now, with the way you're using it on just a wall, having a silver ticket white screen, don't worry about ambient light rejecting. It's going to be completely satisfactory and well worth the $200 to $250 that you're going to pay. So that's the way.
And if you turn on a little light in here, it's fine.
It'll wash out the image somewhat, yes, of course, but
you can completely black it out just by turning the lights off.
That's right.
I think ambient light rejecting is way overkill.
In this
and
instance,
far more expensive. Yeah. So we followed the Dolby speaker placement guidelines. Do we think his surround speakers are in a dumb place, though? Yeah, that's because we say that all the time. I was actually impressed by your surround speakers. He has them almost so his couch is on the back wall. He's got his speakers on stands just about on the back wall, and they're facing each other. I'm like,
that's right.
Exactly.
You nailed it.
I was like, usually this is where I would tell you you're doing it wrong, but you're doing it right. So he's clearly has done his research.
Absolutely.
And whoever tells you you're dumb is dumb. You tell him I said that.
Yep.
Tom said you're dumb.
You nailed it, sir. Nothing to change as far as your surrounds.
So anything else that jumps out that we would recommend?
Some panels on your back wall. That's
yes, definitely panels on the back wall. Acoustic treatments in general in here would be beneficial. I know he hasn't gotten a subwoofer yet. So
because of the positioning of his seating, The panels on your back wall is my number one concern, because your seats are if they're not right on the back wall, they're very close to it. And that would be the number one thing I would do. You can get panels that the subwoofer is behind the projector. It's the white cube that is.
But it's a 0.2 though. I thought.
No, it's 5.1.2. So
0.1.2. Oh,
he's got
sorry.
two overheads, but one sub.
Yeah.
So,
okay, I was looking for the sub. That's what I was looking for. So it's behind there. Yeah. So yeah, more subbage would be nice here too. He's got a hallway and stuff like that. But my first order of business with what you've done so far: screen.
Yep.
Mount.
Yep.
Acoustic panels.
Yeah.
Another sub.
Agreed.
You could take those the first three, and put them in any order that makes sense to you. But I would get the sub last, and this is coming from me. So there you go. And that's anything else that jumps out, right? That's what we're answering.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Gurinder. We talked recently about connecting an Ultra HD Blu-ray player to a 1080p projector and how the player will have to convert HDR to SDR in that case. But the Panasonic players, even the lower price UB420, offer a setting under the color gamut output to always output SDR, but with the BT2020 color instead of Rec 709. So would that conversion look better? I don't know. Would it?
Well, I mean, it heavily depends on your projector. Some projectors can't even do this, where they can't even accept the BT 2020 color gamut if it is not a high dynamic range signal. So that is one consideration. But in particular to the person we were talking to last week about this, they were using a DLP projector that can't even reach beyond Rec 709 colors anyway. So I wouldn't recommend sending it BT 2020 color when it doesn't have the capability of showing it whatsoever. If you have a projector like say one of the earlier generation JVCs, where it could technically take an HDR signal, but it wouldn't really show it correctly, but it could show you the wide color, then there is some benefit there, because you retain the wider color, you retain the compatibility with the high dynamic range signal, but it just sends it out as standard dynamic range so that the projector isn't trying to do something funky that it can't really show. But in the instance of a lower cost projector that can't even really show wider colors to begin with, I wouldn't necessarily recommend using that setting, because that could just lead to even more strange looking images if you try to do that sort of thing. So in general, I'd stick to just leave it at the 1080p standard dynamic range as pat.
Right. Dazz, some updates. He's loving his Emotiva XPA3 and feeling confident playing movies at full reference volume again. His Ascend speakers have their tweeters replaced and sound just like they did before. No, the amp didn't transform the sound at all, as expected. And he accidentally broke the RCA plug on one of his SVS SB12 NSD subs when moving some things around. He emailed SVS, told them it was entirely his fault. They replaced the whole amp anyways, no charge.
That's amazing. I mean, that's an older model at this point. That's fantastic. Yeah. Happy to hear it.
So he was very careful about connecting everything this time, and then he got his ear right up to every speaker to check for any noise. Only his front right CMT 340 SC speaker produces any kind of low hum, and he can only hear it with his ear right next to the speaker grill, not at all from his seat. Is there anything he can or should do to troubleshoot? Yes, you should step away from the speaker and stop being a weirdo.
I mean, hey, I definitely do this. Let's see. Okay. So because there's only a question because none of his other speakers make like any kind of hiss or hum at all.
Thought would be his speaker wire is crossing a power.
Exactly. Or something. It's running relatively physically close to some other wire or going above some other powered device or something like that. Yeah. So what you could try to do, since we're just talking about speaker wire, is connect that speaker, the one that's currently in the front right position, just connect it to some other channel's speaker wire, because if there is then no hum or hiss coming out of that speaker, it is the speaker wire feeding that channel versus the speaker itself, because he did have to replace the tweeters in these speakers. So you can
Right.
eliminate the speaker itself as the source of this little bit of noise. If you then know that it is the speaker wire that is going to your front right channel, well, you can double check the routing of that speaker wire, because if it is running parallel to any other wires, or if it is draped over any other powered device, or coming close to a light fixture or something like that, then, that can be the
If it's
source.
in wall and it's running right parallel to a
Yeah.
to a
Power
wire.
line.
Yeah.
Yep. That would be the way to troubleshoot it.
Yeah, you could. I was thinking while you were talking. This time I wasn't actually daydreaming. I was actually thinking. But he could switch the left. Like if this is the right, right? You could
It's the
switch
front
the
right.
left to the right, and then see if the left starts.
Oh, back at the receiver end. Yeah.
at the receiver end.
Yeah. Switch
and
your
see
banana
if-
plugs. Yeah. Good. Too.
Yeah, see if that makes the other one not hum,
That's
or
right.
the other one to hum.
Yeah. Then you know it's the
works out.
speaker wire again
It's
for
the
sure.
it's the wire itself. Yeah. So we'd like to get some new headphones, and he's interested in trying planar magnetics. He wants an over-ear design. He doesn't care if they are sealed or open back. It would be nice if the cord can be detached and the price stays around $300. Any suggestions? Well, whenever you say planar magnetic, I think the ones I am currently wearing.
Oh, Oppo? But those aren't available
Yeah,
anymore.
but they don't sell them anymore.
No.
And these were actually $300, weren't they? I think the small ones were
can't
$300.
remember the exact price, but yeah.
The big ones were $700, and then there was the bigger one, the other bigger ones that were like $1,000 or something,
I don't remember.
$1,100. But yes, so Hi-Fi Man and Audis are the two that I think of. They're both very good. They both get stellar reviews. I would go and look at their offerings and see what you can find that's in your price range.
Yeah, for this price range where you're trying to get closer to $300, Hi-Fi Man is where I would point you. Now, the HE400S are the ones that are retail price $300. And he talked about potentially wanting to use these in a portable situation. They are easily driven by any portable device. The HE400S would be a very good choice. However, at the moment, the ones that we really like, the $500 Hi-Fi Man Sunderas, are on sale for $350 directly from Hi-Fi Man. Not only that, the HE400Ss are out of stock everywhere, and the Sunderas are in stock. So for $50 extra, you can actually get them, and they're the model that we kind of like best in Hi-Fi Man's lineup. So yeah, definitely consider going $50 over your budget. The Hi-Fi Man Sunderas. They do have detachable cords, but the cords do go to both ear cups. It's not a single cord design. It is a both ear cups cord design. So just be aware of that, but they can be detached. Yeah.
All right. So who do we have left, Rob?
Oh, all right. I wasn't prepared for that. We will be talking next week to Greg, Brian F., Martin, Mitch, and Andrew, who asked very similar questions, so I put them together. Infinite Gary and Mario. Yes, that is everyone on the list. There were questions that came in on Monday, Tuesday. I remember one person last week was like, I didn't hear my name mentioned, but that's because his question came in on Monday. So Monday, Tuesday questions will be on the list as well.
Okay. We want to thank our listeners of the week. We want to thank our 126 patrons over at patreon.com.
Indeed, patreon.com/AVRant podcast for anybody who would like to sign up for an automatic monthly donation. Thanks very much to our 126 patrons over there. Anyone who would like to make a one-time donation and doesn't want to sign up for Patreon, just come to our website, avrant.com, and on the right-hand side, it says Support AVRant. That will take you to PayPal, and you don't have to have a PayPal account. You could just use a credit card if you wanted for a one-time donation.
We want to thank James, our House of Cards listener, for talking us up to Accessories for Less, as well as different James, who included us in his review of the LG's 8K 88-inch OLED on Linus Tech Tips.
Indeed, James Squared. Thank you very much for the first one talking us up to Accessories for Less, and the second for including us in Linus Tech Tips review of the LG 88-inch OLED.
And for the notes of gratitude from Chris, Andy, James, Brett, Martin, Nathan, and Gurinder. Thank you, guys.
Definitely. I'll repeat the names: Chris, Andy, James, Brett, Martin, Nathan, and Gurinder. Thank you all very much for those notes of gratitude and encouragement. They really are appreciated at this time. And thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions. The place to send them is our email address, question@avrant.com. That is definitely the way to get on the podcast these days. I haven't really been transposing things over from Twitter because I'm like, hey, I responded on Twitter. The answer has been provided. And as you have been hearing, we have a backlog of questions. So question@avrant.com, please.
Yeah, you got to send it to the email. If you don't send it to the email, then it's...
No guarantees.
You're waiting for us to go, I don't think we have enough questions this week, which has never happened. Never. It's all right, question@avrant.com. For AVRant, I'm Tom Andry.
And I'm Rob H. Now stay in and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.